Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Vocal Intuition Live. And this morning, I'm very pleased to be able to welcome Nicki Williamson. And Nikki is an expert in well-being. Good morning, Nikki. Lovely to see you.
Good morning. Lovely to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
You're really welcome, and it's an absolute delight. And this morning we're going to be chatting about well-being and what it means, why it's important, how it can benefit us, and also finding out a little bit more about Nikki in general, because she does some fascinating work. So first of all then, Nikki, tell us a bit about yourself and how you came to be doing what you do.
Okay, so many years ago, I worked in a large company and I managed big teams of people, say 200 people at a time. And I personally myself struggled with my mental health. I had a severe bout of anxiety back when I was 24. And I really struggled with being able to effectively lead and support the people in my team. And as the years went by, I recovered completely. But there was lots of techniques that I used to be able to help me do that. I didn't take medication. I didn't. I got support. And actually, the more as a manager, that I spent more time dealing with people's emotional health than I did with actually the management of the teams. So I decided to train in mental health and well-being. And I did that for many years, still in the corporate world, but then decided that actually, if we could proactively provide mental health support, specifically in the workplace and equally specifically in schools, which maybe we'll talk about, then we're less likely as individuals to struggle because we're putting things in place to prevent it happening. Lots of employers have things in place for somebody who maybe present with a mental health condition, and they can access counselling at the point it's happened. But I'm really keen to be putting things in place to prevent it happening in the first place. So
I really like that. I really like that. I like the idea of preventative measures in those sorts of scenarios. And it's interesting, isn't it, how we very often come to be interested in these things, in this side of, I was going to say this side of life, in helping people and looking at well-being and looking at mental health through experiences of our own.
Absolutely.
And it's part of what led me to do my training as a coach as well. So I trained as a life coach because of experiences that I'd had, and I was able to take those into my work with voices. So we're sort of on a parallel there.
Absolutely. With that. And I think that given that you've got a personal experience, really that understanding, then you're in a much better position to be able to help others and very quickly build a rapport with people who may be experiencing that because you've had it yourself and you survived. So that's always a good point.
Absolutely. And you can say, I survived, but you've got an insight into what they might be going through. Yeah. Of course, you won't have an insight into everything that they might be going through, but I think it gives you a certain level of compassion and a certain level of insight, doesn't it, that you can use to help those people. Brilliant. So what do you love best about the work that you do?
Do you know, there's so many different elements of what I do that I struggle to define one. I guess the thing is the results. So when I'm working on a one-to-one basis with someone who maybe has agoraphobia and hasn't been able to leave the house, and they're free of that condition and are able to live a life. I mean, it's very egotistical, but I don't mean it that way. It's the individual that's done the work. But it's a great feeling to be able to support others and to see them achieve what they're absolutely capable of achieving. So that's in terms of the one-to-one. With the children in schools, I had low self-esteem as a child, and I genuinely believe that if my self-esteem had been where it should be, then I would have achieved much more in my grades. So when I'm working with the children in schools through the Shine Time program, to see them achieve the SATs results or the GCSE results that they're truly worthy of is amazing. It's just but again, they've done the work. I've just shown them how.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, isn't it? With any of this kind of work, whether it's well-being, whether it's mental health, whether it's therapy, whether it's coaching, we are actually facilitating the person to do things for themselves. We're giving them the tools that they need.
Yeah,
And
and
then
there's a choice, isn't there? I mean, some people, you can show them all these techniques, you can coach and support them through, but actually sometimes people are almost fearful of making that change, and
of course.
until they overcome that fear, then they'll stay where they are. Yeah.
Because change is scary. And I find that with my coaching. I find it with voices, actually. People are scared to change their voice because it's such a part of them.
Mhm.
It's such a part of who they are.
Yeah.
And they have very set ideas and beliefs about what that is and how it should come across. And
Mhm.
that transfers into all sorts of other areas of life as well, doesn't it? So
Definitely.
tell me a bit more about the prevention side in terms of businesses. What do you put in place there?
Okay, so there it ranges. We can start at the highest level, which is looking at the well-being strategy. And
Mhm.
for people, a lot of employers that I work with have already got some form of well-being strategy in the workplace, but it's very much focused on physical well-being rather than
Mhm.
emotional. So we start at that top level and look at how the staff are feeling. I train the managers on mental health risk assessments and how to carry those out, how to empower the individuals in their team to make the change necessary to improve their well-being. As we said earlier, it's about empowering the staff to make the change.
Absolutely. Mm.
We do an assessment. So we have a visual scorecard which shows us the areas in the workplace that may be falling down slightly in terms of maybe the level of demand that everyone feels that they're under, or the relationships across the team are not where they need to be, that kind of thing. And then support the managers in developing an action plan for that change to then
Yes.
support the teams. So if we're doing everything we can, if we're having those open conversations with our teams on a regular basis, if we're putting strategy in place to be able to support early, recognise the warning signs, then results have shown that actually employers increase engagement and have reduced sickness absence because they're catching it before it's really started.
Mm. I
Mm,
really love that. And so they've got something definite that they can work with, and
absolutely.
they know where they're going. They have a direction with that.
And also they have the confidence. Mental health is always been a difficult subject to approach, and people
Mm.
historically have kind of steered away from being able to, or even wanting to ask people, "How are you? How do you feel?" And likewise, particularly in the workplace, people feel concerned about sharing with their employer when they might be struggling for fear of the perception that they're not able to do their job. So opening up the conversation is the real place to start for employers.
Yeah, just to be able to start to bring those things out,
Yeah.
because it's very, as we've said earlier, it's very often held in. People just get on with the day-to-day job. And we have a thing in this country, don't we, where we say, "Hi, how are you?" And everybody goes, "Oh, I'm fine. I'm fine.
Yes.
Everything's
Mhm.
okay. Oh, it's all going okay? Yeah, it's fine."
Mm.
And underneath there's all this turmoil, and so that's where we need to start looking a bit further. We could do
Yeah.
with being a bit more honest, I think, sometimes, and
Mhm.
actually saying, "Well, no, it's not fine. I really need help in XYZ area
Yeah.
in order to do my job properly."
And
In
I
order to
certainly found as an employer, when in the corporate world, at the point that I began to talk to my team about how I had been feeling, and at that
mm,
point I was managing a team of just 10, but 7 of them all shared that they had had very similar experiences. But it
mm.
was at the point that I shared my experience that others then feel able to share theirs, and encouraging employers to be able to do that and have those conversations with their teams is a really critical starting point, I think.
I do too.
Mm.
And if we have excuse me, if we have managers who understand the issues, then they're not going to be putting labels on people and saying, "Oh, well, so and so has mental health problems. That's why they can't do the job, or that's why they can't do this, that, or the other." They're going to help
Absolutely. And you know,
facilitate something
the
better.
yes, yes. The perception, I think, historically has also been that if you are struggling with your mental health, it means that you're weak. Um,
Exactly.
and actually, I have worked with hundreds of people over the years, one to one, many of whom have been chief executive officers, directors, owners of large companies, and it doesn't mean that you're weak. It just means that we need to kind of deal with the issues that we've experienced and to be able to pass them and let them go.
Completely. And it means that you're human, and
Yes.
really that your management team ought to be looking out for you, because if they want you to work in the best way that you can, then it pays them to facilitate that. They need to support you on both a human and, I suppose, a professional level as well,
Yes.
as
Yes.
is my thought. So if you were to put into a nutshell what well-being is, what would you say?
Well-being is, so I always focus on the emotion. As I said, the employers historically was focused on the physical well-being. So when we're looking at physical well-being, we look at our diet, making sure we're eating well, exercise, maybe smoking cessation, financial support, those kind of physical things that we put in place. For me, the focus is really on how we're feeling emotionally. Our level of resilience, our level of self-esteem, our level of confidence. I think if they're where they need to be, our emotional well-being is where it needs to be too. Very often, if we're not doing things to help us feel good emotionally, then potentially, then we're not feeling well. Is probably I remember somebody saying to me many years ago, we need to remember we're human beings, not human doings.
Yeah.
And that was a really key thing for me to say, yeah, do you know, I need to take some time for me. And I think when we're doing that and we're putting ourselves a bit higher up the pile than we usually do, then our well-being will be where we want it to be.
Yeah, and it's amazing how well things seem to fall into place when we do actually do that. I found that for myself. It's an interesting.
What do you do for your own like emotional well-being? Have you got some?
I was just about to say that, because I think it's not so much the emotions as the way that we deal with them and process them and understand that they are just emotions. So I will meditate, or I take some quiet time, and I'll try and tune into the feeling and accept the feeling. This is what I would get people to do: accept the feeling, say, okay, but this is an emotion, or this is a thought, whatever it happens to be, it can pass. It can pass. And then to move probably into, I use affirmations for myself a lot. So I will, I will say something like, oh, I don't know. For instance, I can do this performance. It will be great. Or I am a good teacher. I can help these people. Not that I've got an imposter syndrome or anything. I'm just giving an example, but I think it reinforces your own self-esteem. And too many people are happy to say, oh, no, I don't doubt myself at all. I'm an expert. Everybody doubts themselves. Everybody thinks, can I really do this at some point in their life?
Of course they do.
So it has to be. So I use an I can, or I am doing, put it in the present, and I encourage my clients to do it as well. And obviously I come across a lot of people who don't like performing, whether it be actually singing or professional speaking, or just like we're doing now on an interview for something that is related to their business.
Yeah.
And that sort of fear stems from, how will I come across? Will people like me? Will they understand my message and all of that? So we can use those reinforcing ideas there. Do you use similar things? Do you?
Personally. And when I'm training, when I'm doing the wellbeing workshops that we deliver, we talk about self-statements, because very often it is that little thought that pops up into your head. And I use a scenario where I'm delivering training, and as I'm driving to the training, if my thoughts are they going to listen to me? Are they going to understand me? Oh, what if I forget? So what if is often a very good indicator of an anxious thought. What if, and it's all quite negative. And we talk about having that statement that you kind of delete the negativity and you put this statement at the top of your mind, and that's the one you focus on. And that becomes the reality then.
We reframe it as well, don't we, by doing that?
Definitely.
So that the reality becomes something that's much better, and that in turn changes our emotions, so that we feel differently about things.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting because I think very much it's about, we have a self, we have an internal self. That's who we are. I call that the internal voice. We have a physical voice, which is what comes out to everybody around us, but we have that voice in the head, which is what you've just been talking about. Our constant thoughts, our brain that's trying to catch us out, trying to warn us about problems. If we have no problems, the brain will invent some.
For sure.
It will, because it's a whole, I suppose, survival strategy. If things are going well, the body just goes, oh, okay, on autopilot. If there's a chance of something going wrong, that might go wrong, and we're straight into the old limbic system, chimp brain, aren't we?
Yes, we are the what ifs. And many clients come to me, and when I talk to them about their experiencing anxiety, and I say, do those thoughts start with what if? And they go, yeah. And it's what if, and then worst case scenario. And that's kind of the things that's the way our mind plays it out to us. But if we change that thought and we change those images, then we can change the way we feel. And that is really powerful.
Very powerful, very powerful. I suppose if people have a really serious issue, it can take longer, but it can still be done.
Absolutely.
And it's a way of facilitating growth for them. Something that I use a lot is looking beyond, if it's an event. So if I have to, for instance, us this morning, if we have to do this interview, what if I dry up and I ask all the wrong questions? Or what if I look funny on the camera? Or what if my light doesn't go right? Or as we had before the broadcast, what if StreamYard doesn't work? Because it wasn't doing, was it? But we just kept calm and went, okay, it'll be all right. We'll just log out and in again, and you had to download something and it's fine. But all that turmoil goes on. On the other hand, if we think, right, I'm going to be doing this performance, live video, recording, whatever it happens to be, phone call to a new client, I'm going to imagine that I've done that and I'm going out of the other side. It's just one event in the day. So if I go through that and I imagine what I'll be doing afterwards, and then I'm going to give myself a little treat for doing it. I'm going to have a cup of tea. I'm going to sit for 5 minutes and have a cup of tea. After I've done that, you just have to make sure that you do that thing. But then the brain gets its reward, and it's not just hyper-focusing on one small event in the day. With a singer, it can be a high note. With a speaker, it can be a huge audience, or whether my tone is right, whether my volume is right, all of those things, whether they get my message. So I quite like looking beyond. What will happen beyond that event?
That's a really good strategy. Absolutely. Yeah. And then it will shrink the event, because if we're focusing purely on the event becomes the be all and end all, as you say. Yeah, that's a good strategy.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Brilliant. Well, just to finish off with Nikki, what are your 3 top tips, do you think, or recommendations for people who are looking to improve their well-being starting today? What are your top 3?
Today, one of the top tips is to talk about how you feel. Absolutely. To recognize that, as you say, we all have emotions. It's normal. And the more we talk, the more we realize how normal it is, because as I've said, when it happened to me, so many other people then said, yeah, I feel exactly the same. So it normalizes how you feel. So that's my first one. The second one is to take time for you, and remember that pile that I was talking about, to move yourself up to the top of the pile. Again, a lot of people will put, the job, the family, the kids, the dog, the cat, and then me. Yeah. So think about the ways in which you can move yourself up to the top of the pile. And the other thing is to get something that you can focus on that's just for you. So obviously exercising, that goes without saying, like eating well, exercise, all of that kind of thing. But find something that gives your mind time out. So like meditation, hypnosis is a great way. Obviously, that's the thing that I use. And just being. Yeah. So it's those 3 things. Put yourself at the top of the pile. Talk about how you're feeling, and find something where your mind is just switching off, whatever it might be. Even just a walk in nature. But if you're focusing on the nature rather than what you've got to do when you get back to the office, that's the important thing. So they're my
Yeah.
top tips. And if you're struggling, then reach out to somebody that you know can help.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Nikki. That's been really illuminating this morning. It's been lovely to chat with you.
Thank you for having me.
And if you want to reach out to Nikki, we'll put a couple of links in the comments after this broadcast. Obviously, if you're watching on the recording, you can add comments or questions and we'll come back to you. And I've noticed a couple of people watching as we've been going through. So if you have any comments or questions, do pop them up there. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Nikki, and I'll see you again soon. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.